People always say that children are a reflection of their parents. If that's true, then my son's betrayal was a mirror I wish I'd never looked into. My name is Richard Callahan. I'm 63 years old, and for the better part of my life, I worked with one goal in mind: to give my family a life better than the one I grew up with. I was born in a two-bedroom house with a leaky roof, raised by a father who worked himself to death in a steel mill and a mother who rationed every penny like it was gold. I swore to myself that when I had kids, they'd never feel that kind of scarcity. And for decades, I kept that promise. I worked every shift I could. I stayed late, picked up extra jobs, sometimes 3 at a time. There were months when I barely saw my wife or my kids because I was on the road, fixing machinery in distant factories, driving deliveries overnight, or sitting in motel rooms with grease under my fingernails and calluses splitting open across my palms. Every time I missed a birthday or a school recital, I told myself it was for them. Every time I came home with my back aching and my shirt sticking to my skin, I told myself this sacrifice would make their lives easier. And it worked. At least, I thought it did. My son, Andrew, grew up with everything I didn't have: private school, summer camps, college fully paid for. When his friends got second-hand cars at 16, I gave him a used Honda Civic that ran like a dream. Not brand new, not flashy, but reliable. He complained, but I ignored it. He had no idea what it felt like to ride the bus in the dead of winter. My wife, Margaret, always said, "Don't be too hard on him, Richard. He's young. He'll grow out of it." And maybe I believed her, because fathers want to see the best in their sons. But Andrew didn't grow out of it. He grew into it. By the time he graduated college, he had a sharp tongue, expensive taste, and a way of looking at me like I was an old relic who didn't understand the world anymore. I brushed it off. Kids think they're smarter than their parents. It's a rite of passage. I didn't realize it was the beginning of something darker. When Margaret passed away 3 years ago, I thought the family would rally together. I thought Andrew would step up, be the man of the house, show me that the years of sacrifice had been worth it. Instead, he drifted further away. He still came around, still smiled when he wanted something, but I could see the distance in his eyes. Then came the day I caught him in my office. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I'd left work early, a rare treat, thinking I might surprise him with dinner. When I walked into the house, I heard the faint sound of typing upstairs. My office door, which I always locked, was cracked open. And there he was, my son, sitting at my desk, my papers spread out, my checkbook in his hand. He jumped when he saw me, but quickly pasted on a smile. "Hey, Dad. I was just, looking for some old files. You know, for Mom's estate stuff." Something in his voice didn't ring true. His hands trembled just enough to give him away. I stepped forward and saw it. A document on the screen with my name typed neatly at the bottom. Only, it wasn't my signature. It was his. "Andrew," I said slowly, "what is this?" He closed the laptop with a snap, forced a laugh. "It's nothing. Just practicing something for class. Don't worry about it." But I knew. Right then, I knew. For years, I'd sacrificed everything for my son, and there he was, forging my signature. I didn't confront him fully that day. Maybe I should have. Maybe I should have grabbed the papers, demanded answers, called the police. But he was my boy, my only son, my blood. So I swallowed the truth. I let him walk out of that room, told myself I'd misunderstood. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew. I knew the child I'd raised was about to become the man who would betray me. Backhand index pointing right. What would you do if you caught your child forging your signature and digging through your finances? Would you call the police immediately, or would you wait, like I did, to make the revenge even sweeter? Tell me in the comments. Fire, and don't forget, subscribe to Sweetest Revenge for more stories where betrayal cuts deep and patience turns into power. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the sound of Margaret's voice echoing in my head. "Don't be too hard on him, Richard. He's young. He'll grow out of it." But he hadn't grown out of it. He'd grown bolder. And I had a sinking feeling this was only the beginning. The night I caught Andrew forging my name, I told myself maybe it was a mistake. Maybe he was just curious. Maybe he panicked and lied. Fathers cling to excuses the way drowning men cling to driftwood. But deep down, I knew better. Over the next few weeks, I started watching him more closely. Not obviously, just enough to notice the things I'd ignored before. When Andrew came by for dinner, he always gravitated toward my office. He'd offer to help me with paperwork, or organize Mom's old files. His tone was too rehearsed, his eyes scanning the shelves like he was casing the place. Once, I stepped out to take a phone call and came back to find him slipping something into his pocket. He claimed it was just a pen, but I'd left my checkbook on that desk. The numbers didn't lie. Small withdrawals had begun appearing in my accounts. 100 here, 200 there. Just under the radar, just enough to seem like banking errors. I kept my mouth shut, because I realized that if Andrew was bold enough to skim from me, it wasn't going to stop there. He'd get greedy. And greed is the one thing you can always count on. It makes people sloppy. I started making copies of everything. Bank statements, checks, credit card receipts. I bought a small safe and tucked it behind a false wall in the garage. Every time Andrew visited, I felt like I was moving chess pieces one step ahead of him. One Saturday, he asked if he could borrow my truck. Said he needed to move some things for a friend. I handed him the keys without hesitation because I'd already checked the glove box. The truck was clean, but when he brought it back, I noticed the odometer had jumped more than it should have for a simple errand. Later, I checked the GPS history. My son hadn't gone to a friend's house. He'd gone to a bank. And not just any bank, one where I had an account tied to my retirement. I can still remember the way my stomach twisted when I called the bank and asked about recent activity. The teller's voice was calm, almost bored, as she listed transactions I hadn't made. Transfers to an external account. Withdrawals I hadn't authorized. All approved with a signature that looked enough like mine to pass at first glance. Andrew. It was Andrew. He wasn't just skimming checks. He was bleeding me dry. I hung up the phone and sat there in silence for a long time. 15 years of private school tuition. 4 years of college paid in full. A car. Rent money when he first moved out. I'd given him everything I could, and he'd decided it wasn't enough. That night, I sat in my office staring at a photo of Margaret holding Andrew as a baby. Her smile was tired but proud, the way only a mother can look after hours of labor. She'd loved him fiercely. She'd defended him even when he didn't deserve it. And now she was gone, and he was cashing in on my grief. I whispered to her picture, "I'm sorry, Maggie. I should have raised him better. But I promise you, he won't get away with this." From then on, I played the role of the blind old man. When Andrew asked about my accounts, I pretended not to notice his fishing. When he suggested I give him power of attorney, just in case something happened, I chuckled and said I wasn't ready for the nursing home yet. He laughed too, but there was something sharp in his eyes. Something hungry. I realized he wasn't planning to wait until I was gone. He wanted control now. So I gave him rope. I left papers half-signed on my desk, blank checks in the drawer, folders labeled trust and estate in plain sight. And every time he took the bait, I wrote it down. Date, time, what went missing. My safe in the garage grew heavier with evidence. But Andrew didn't just want money. He wanted legacy. One evening, he brought up Margaret's will. "Dad, you know Mom always wanted me to take care of things. Maybe we should make sure everything's in my name, just to keep it simple. You don't want lawyers dragging things out." I stared at him across the table, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. The audacity of it. He wasn't even hiding it anymore. He wanted me erased. I forced a smile. "You're right, son. I'll think about it." And his face lit up like a child on Christmas morning. That's when I knew. This wasn't a phase. It wasn't youthful arrogance. It wasn't stress or confusion. It was betrayal. Cold, deliberate, and calculated. And I wasn't going to confront him with anger. I wasn't going to scream or cry or beg him to remember the years I spent breaking my back to give him the world. No, I was going to wait. I was going to let him believe he'd won. And then, when the time was right, I'd show him exactly what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. Backhand index pointing right. If you were in my position, watching your only child steal from you piece by piece, would you cut him off immediately, or would you let him dig his own grave first? Share your thoughts in the comments. Fire, and don't forget, subscribe to Sweetest Revenge for more stories where betrayal meets its reckoning, and quiet fathers show just how loud their revenge can be. That night, as I locked away another stack of evidence, I realized something chilling. I wasn't just preparing to expose my son. I was preparing to bury him. In truth, in shame, and in the consequences he thought he was too clever to face. By the time winter rolled around, Andrew wasn't even pretending anymore. He used to play the dutiful son, showing up for dinner once a week, asking about my health, smiling at the neighbors like he was some golden child. But little by little, the mask slipped. He grew impatient, sharper, more demanding. It started small. He'd say things like, "Dad, you really shouldn't be managing your own money at your age. You could make a mistake." Or, "Why don't you let me handle the bills? I've got more energy than you." I'd nod, smile, and change the subject. Outwardly, I acted like the aging father who didn't want to admit he was slowing down. Inwardly, I was cataloging every word. The truth was, Andrew wasn't asking. He was testing how far he could push. And when I didn't push back, he grew bolder. One evening, he showed up with documents already printed. Power of attorney papers. He slid them across the table like he was offering me a business contract. "Dad," he said smoothly, "this is just for emergencies. If something happened to you, this would let me make sure the bills get paid, the accounts don't freeze. It's just practical." I picked up the papers, squinted at them like my eyes were failing. "Power of attorney, huh? Sounds important." He smiled. "It's just a formality. Lots of families do this." I set the papers back down carefully, then said, "I'll think about it." Andrew's jaw tightened just for a second before he plastered the smile back on. Of course, no rush. But there was rush. I could see it in his eyes. Greed doesn't like to wait. That night, I called my lawyer, Martin. He'd been a friend of mine for 30 years, helped me through Margaret's estate. I told him everything about the forged checks, the suspicious transfers, the push for power of attorney. Martin's voice was low and steady. "Richard, this isn't just disrespect. This is fraud. We can stop him cold, but if you want him exposed, really exposed, we'll need to be patient. Let him think he's winning." Patience. It had become my sharpest weapon. So we built a plan. Martin drafted decoy documents, fake account statements, mock-up trusts, even a false will, leaving everything to Andrew. We placed them carefully in my office where Andrew would find them if he snooped. And snoop he did. The next time he came over, he excused himself to use the bathroom. 10 minutes later, I found the folder on my desk slightly out of place, like a thief who thought he was clever. I said nothing. I just smiled when he came back, wiping his hands, pretending everything was normal. 2 days later, I noticed the decoy, had been photocopied. Andrew thought he was building his case. What he didn't know was that every copy he made was another rope around his own neck. The arrogance didn't stop there. He started showing off to his friends, bragging about how he'd be taking care of the old man's estate soon. Word got back to me through neighbors. One woman even asked, half joking, if I'd already signed everything over. I laughed, shook my head, and played the part of the oblivious father. But inside, my fury grew. Andrew wasn't just betraying me in private. He was rehearsing his victory in public. The final straw came when I found out he'd tried to take out a loan in my name. A loan secured against my house. The house I'd built with Margaret. The home where we'd raised him. The bank flagged the signature, called me directly. The manager was an old friend. He said, "Richard, I don't know who's trying to pull this, but it looks like your son's handwriting." That was it. The line had been crossed. I met with Martin the next morning. He looked me in the eye and said, "We're ready. The evidence is enough. We'll file, but I want you to think. Do you want this handled quietly, or do you want him exposed in a way he can't recover from?" I didn't hesitate. "Exposed," I said, because it wasn't just about the money anymore. It wasn't even about the betrayal. It was about every sacrifice I'd made, every hour I'd worked, every birthday I'd missed so that Andrew could stand on my shoulders. He'd used my love as a ladder to climb, and now he thought he could kick me off the rung. No, he was going to fall, and everyone was going to see it. Backhand index pointing right. If your own child betrayed you like this, stealing, forging, lying, would you cut them off quietly to save the family's shame? Or would you expose them publicly so the truth could never be denied? Tell me in the comments. That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat in Margaret's old armchair. I imagined her voice, soft and steady, telling me to be patient. And I whispered back, "Don't worry, Maggie. I've been patient long enough." Andrew thought he was about to inherit an empire. What he didn't know was that he'd just walked himself into a courtroom trap, and I was the one holding the key. Greed is blind. It doesn't see warning signs. It doesn't sense danger. It only runs forward until it crashes into the wall. And Andrew, my son, was running faster than ever. It started with late-night phone calls. I'd hear his voice through the walls when he thought I was asleep, pacing the kitchen, whispering about accounts and paperwork. Once, I caught a fragment. "Yeah, once it's all in my name, it's over." That same week, he showed up with a folder under his arm. He placed it on my dining table with a salesman's smile. "Dad, I had my friend. He's a notary. Look this over. It's just the cleanest way to handle things. Once you sign, you won't have to worry about bills or taxes or anything." I opened the folder and there it was. Transfer of assets, power of attorney, even authorization to access my pension. He drafted a noose for me and handed me the rope. I leaned back, squinted at the papers like the words blurred together. "You really think I should?" "Of course," Andrew said smoothly. "It's the smart thing to do. Trust me, Dad." Trust. The word nearly made me laugh out loud. Instead, I signed one of Martin's decoy documents right in front of him. Andrew's eyes glittered like a child unwrapping a gift. He had no idea that what I signed wasn't a transfer, it was bait. Over the next few weeks, Martin and I set the stage. Every suspicious withdrawal, every forged check, every attempt Andrew made to act as though he controlled my estate, we documented it. When he tried to move money from the account listed on the fake paperwork, the trail led directly back to him. And then he made his biggest mistake. He went to my bank with the forged power of attorney and tried to take out another loan against my house. This time, the bank didn't just call me. They called the police. By the time I arrived, Andrew was red-faced, stammering at the branch manager, waving the papers like they were gospel. He turned, saw me in the doorway, and froze. "Dad, tell them, it's fine. You signed this." I walked forward slowly, every eye in the room on me. I took the papers from his hands, flipped through them, and then looked him dead in the eye. "Yes, I signed it," I said evenly. "And my lawyer signed it, too, as evidence." Andrew's mouth opened, but no words came out. The police officer cleared his throat. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us." Andrew sputtered. "This is a mistake. He's my father. He gave me permission." But the manager spoke next. "Mr. Callahan, the documents don't match the original filings. They're fraudulent." I didn't move as they cuffed my son. I just stood there, watching the boy I'd raised, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for, squirm like a trapped animal. He turned toward me, his eyes wide with something between fury and desperation. "Dad, say something. Help me." And I did. I said, "I told you, Andrew. Patience is a weapon, and you handed me the proof yourself." The courtroom came next. Weeks later, we sat across from each other in front of a judge, lawyers flanking both sides. The evidence Martin and I had built was airtight. Forged checks, bank statements, the fake will Andrew had copied, even recordings of him bragging about how he'd take everything once I was out of the way. Andrew tried to play the victim. He painted me as a senile old man, manipulated by a greedy lawyer. He called me paranoid, unfit, out of touch. But the judge wasn't swayed. One by one, Martin laid out the documents. Each piece of paper was another nail in Andrew's coffin. When the PI testified that he'd seen Andrew leaving my office with documents stuffed under his jacket, the room went silent. And when the bank manager took the stand, explaining how Andrew tried to use fraudulent paperwork to seize my assets, the judge leaned back and shook his head. The verdict was swift. Fraud, forgery, attempted theft. Andrew was stripped of access to my accounts, barred from handling any financial matters, and ordered to repay every cent he'd stolen. Criminal charges hung over him like a guillotine. I looked at him across the courtroom. He didn't look like the golden boy anymore. He looked small, pathetic, a man who thought he was smarter than his father, undone by his own arrogance. And for the first time in months, I felt a strange peace. Backhand index pointing right, what would you have done? Protected your son and kept the shame hidden? Or let the truth burn him down in front of a courtroom? Tell me in the comments. Fire, and don't forget, subscribe to Sweetest Revenge for more stories where the deepest betrayals get the justice they deserve. As we left the courthouse, Andrew wouldn't look at me. His hands were shaking, his jaw clenched. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was just free. The day after court, my house felt different. Quieter, lighter, like the walls themselves had been holding their breath and finally let it out. For the first time in years, I didn't check my desk 3 times before bed. I didn't wake in the night, afraid to hear my son creeping through the house like a thief. But peace doesn't erase pain. I sat in Margaret's old chair, staring at the family photo on the mantel, her in the middle, smiling, Andrew with his arm around me. I wondered what she would have thought of all this. Would she have blamed me for letting him go too far? Would she have begged me to shield him, even after he tried to bleed me dry? Or would she have looked at me with those steady eyes of hers and said, "You did what had to be done"? The weeks that followed were a blur of fallout. Word spread fast. Neighbors whispered. Old friends called shocked. Some offered sympathy, others judgment. "How could you do that to your own son?" they asked. But none of them had lived my life. None of them had watched the boy they'd raised grow into a man who forged their name and tried to steal the roof over their head. The hardest part was the family. My sister tried to intervene, begged me to let it go. She said, "He's still your son, Richard. Blood is blood." But I shook my head. Blood means nothing if he's willing to spill mine for money. Andrew, meanwhile, faced the consequences he thought he'd never see. His friends stopped returning his calls. His job let him go quietly. No company wants a man on staff with a fraud conviction hanging over him. The girlfriend he'd been bragging to disappeared. I heard she left town the week after his arrest. And me? I rebuilt. I restructured my accounts with Martin, put protections in place so that no one, not Andrew, not anyone, could touch them without my consent. I joined a small group at church for widowers, men who understood what it meant to lose both a spouse and a sense of family. I started spending time with people who valued honesty over appearances. But the sweetest moment, the one that stays with me, came 3 months later at a family gathering. My niece was graduating college, and the whole clan showed up. I walked in with my head high, and for once, no one looked past me to Andrew. They looked at me, at the man who had weathered betrayal and come out stronger. Andrew didn't show. He wasn't invited. And for the first time, no one asked where he was. That silence said more than any words could. Because you see, revenge isn't always about destroying someone. Sometimes it's about reclaiming yourself. It's about standing in front of everyone who doubted you, everyone who whispered, and showing them that patience and truth are sharper than any lie. Do I miss my son? Yes. Some nights, the grief is heavier than the anger ever was. But grief is clean. Anger is poison. And I chose to be done drinking poison. Andrew will live with his choices. And I will live with mine. Backhand index pointing right, tell me. If your only child betrayed you like mine did, would you still forgive them in the end? Or would you let them bear the full weight of their actions? Drop your answer in the comments. Fire, and don't forget, subscribe to Sweetest Revenge for more stories where betrayal doesn't get the last word. As I locked the door that night, I looked at Margaret's picture one last time and whispered, I kept my promise. I gave him everything. And when he tried to take it all, I didn't let him win. For the first time in years, I slept soundly. Not as a paranoid father, not as a broken man, but as someone finally free of lies. And that, more than anything, was the sweetest revenge.